Hello and welcome to ET Auto and to this episode of Target Net Zero, a discussion series with industry leaders from India and overseas on the themes of sustainability and carbon neutrality. When we talk about sustainability in mobility and, of course, reducing the carbon footprint, electrification is by default a major topic of discussion. And that is what majorly we'll do in this episode with our guest, Mr. Shailesh Chandra, the Managing Director of Tata Motors Passenger Vehicles and Tata Passenger Electric Mobility. Shailesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is always a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sparing your time. First of all, let's do a status check of the electric mobility industry in India currently. Tata Motors, of course, taking the lead, continues the lead. But in terms of overall, if you look at the outlook, but first let's do a status check and what is the kind of market trends, market feedback rather, and how do we see it panning out?
See, if you, Sanand, to see last 3-4 years journey of electric vehicle, it used to be a 2,000 annual sales kind of an industry, primarily fleet, mainly for employee transportation and few government sales. That was the industry. And post the launch of personal segment models like Nexon EV and some other competitor models which have come, has really helped the personal segment also grow, which is literally 90-95% of the market. That 2000 in FY19, that was the sale of electric vehicle cars. That has now grown to last year to about 20,000. And by this 22,000 was the sale last year, and in the last 5 months of the current financial year, we already touched that kind of a number, 20,000. So it has been a very steep growth. EV car sales have been growing on an annual basis 3.5 to 4 times. The reason behind it has been supportive government policies. You have seen FAME, but that was more applicable for mobility services. Right. But on top of that, a lower GST rate, state government coming with policies which have also encouraged the personal segment buyers. Positive word of mouth of about 45,000 electric car owners has really helped in alleviating the mental barriers, right, which were there, because these people have been talking positively about their experiences. Right. Which gives confidence to the people who are on the other side of the fence. Right. So that has helped. All this has led to the kind of growth that we have seen. Real barriers like charging infra, choices, all are also improving every day as we are talking. Right. So all these factors have led to a steep growth, and I believe that for next few years you are still going to see growth, not in certain percentage but multiple folds.
Yeah, exponential growth is the term exactly. That is for electric vehicles industry's growth. Right. Okay, so when it comes to Tata Motors, in terms of contribution from the EV portfolio, is about what, 8.5-9% out now?
Yeah, I think we are about 8.5%. But that is for, when you take that as a percentage of the entire portfolio of 7 products. We have only electrified 2 products, which is Tigor and Nexon. And if you just take these 2 models, our penetration would be roughly 20%, 25%, in that kind of a zone.
And when we're talking about expecting a exponential growth in the industry for Tata Motors, if you look at it, what is the time horizon wherein you see that there will be a 50-50 kind of contribution in terms of electric vehicles and non-electrics?
I would say by the end of the decade, hopefully that kind of a situation might be there, because our full portfolio of electric vehicles would have got developed. And by that time, the ecosystem would also be very supportive through different interventions that we are seeing. And that's why I would believe that by the end of this decade, we should be closer to that kind of a ratio, is what I would believe.
And your Avinya platform will be very crucial, right? So is the timeline in terms of the commercial production, the market introduction remains the same of 2025, or do you think perhaps things are kind of moving faster, and given the growing appetite, you may have to advance it a little bit?
There are logical timelines for these kind of products, and we have taken an aggressive timeline of doing it in 2025. We have to do it right. We have to bring it with a high degree of maturity, and the current target remains 2025. And Avinya, as you know, is going to be the first product on the Generation 3 platform, which is a pure EV platform. And subsequently, every year or every 2 years, there will be additional models coming on that platform.
And you, when you say every 2 years and an additional model, of course, there will be different top hats, right?
Absolutely.
So what's the kind of segments that you would like to kind of cover with them?
It's interesting, because as far as we clearly stated that we have 3-generation strategy. The first generation products we already have, which is Nexon, Tigor, which is a conversion product where you have not done much of intervention. You have packaged the electric powertrain batteries in the space which was available. In Generation 2, you adapted the current ICE platforms to support more efficient and higher range electric vehicles to be made on those platforms, and also a new top hat program, as you would have seen in the concept curve. That is the Generation 2, and Generation 3 would be the pure EVs. Now, it's interesting when you ask that which segments they would be, because if you talk about Avinya, it does not fall in the traditional segment, because the traditional body styles were more form factors which was following an ICE powertrain packaging. Here the packaging changes, because now you have everything is centered around the batteries, right? And skateboard, as we say, it is literally the shape of a skateboard. And then you have flexibilities and more degrees of freedom to give a new value proposition in terms of interior space in a given footprint. And it can be very innovative body styles that you give, which will not fall in the conventional body styles as we know today.
Right.
So it will be very interesting to see first concept we have shown, Avinya, which is different people will say different body styles to that. Somebody can say that is an MPV. Somebody will say, given the stance, it's an SUV. So it brings the best.
Going by your track record of the current model portfolio and their concepts, one can expect the production version to be more or less there, right? As what was shown.
It should be. You always concept is not 100% that you are able to deliver as you start facing different constraints, but broadly you will be there.
Right. Now if you look at slightly broader view, Shailesh, electrification, no tailpipe emission, absolutely fine, much needed. If you look at overall, the challenges addressing the global challenge of environmental degradation, there's also an argument that if you look at, I'm not talking about the well to wheel also in terms of the source of electricity, but even in the production, mainly the most crucial part, the battery, the environmental impact is huge. So doesn't that kind of negate the advantages to some extent? And what are the measures you think the industry can take to kind of mitigate those, address those?
See, I have been reading an article recently which was published by ICCT, and it compared the life cycle emissions of all the different powertrain types: diesel, gasoline, the ethanol mix, CNG, and hybrids, and so on. And it came to a conclusion. When I say life cycle emission, there are two parts to it. One is the cradle to grave emission, which includes all the manufacturing processes and all the components that go behind. And then the second part is the well to wheel, which is wheel to tank and tank to wheel. When you see all the powertrains and their life cycle emissions, electric vehicles come to the minimum level when it is 100% on renewable. But even if you take the current mix of what you see today as far as renewable versus say coal-based and so on, it is still giving you the best results. Then you have the hydrogen fuel cell. So from a life cycle emission perspective also, you see the long-term bet has to be electric. Now the question is that how fast you will move towards renewable to get the best life cycle emission profile is what the effort should be. And the country is also fast moving towards renewable energy. It's an imperative also. If there is a COP26 commitment that the country has taken a pledge on that, all these are the areas where the country will have to move fast and accelerate the journey. So therefore, I feel that out of all the technologies which are available, battery electric vehicle out of all the alternatives is finally the eventual technology which will help us serve. In this journey, you have to reduce the life cycle emissions, as you said, and that has to be done at every stage of the production. And at the same time, you have to also ensure that the source of electricity is also green.
One is that, and also the materials for especially the battery. Is currently the lithium ion is the workhorse technology option, but lithium mining is highly environment unfriendly, if I can call it.
Right.
So are you looking at kind of different options also to kind of negate that? Because the current argument is, yes, if you continue with lithium ion, if the batteries to be produced are not made of recycled materials, then the carbon footprint kind of argument is negative.
Correct. So there are many initiatives that we are also basing our sustainability efforts on the 3 pillars of net zero, circular economy, and also on the biodiversity. So on the circular economy and the use of sustainable material, I think this is going to be a big part. Also, how we reduce that footprint through reuse, repurposing, and recycling is going to be a big part of this whole effort. At the same time, I also believe that there will be advent of technology. There are many breakthrough technologies on which you are seeing different people working on that. We are also working with some of these people, which helps us move away from lithium ion and in long term, and how we bring our dependence on them is going to be an ongoing effort. But sustainability in general, we'll have to see at every part level, just not the lithium ion battery that you talked about. But if this is the technology which is available, we have to just see how we minimize the emissions or life cycle emissions.
So therefore, I was looking at collaborations with maybe partners or doing it yourself at the Tata Group level on kind of setting up a recycling infrastructure, maybe.
No, so we are working within the Tata Group also. We are working with some other collaboration partners also, and it's not only recycling, as I said. There is reuse and repurposing also that we are working with some partners, and all three have to be pursued simultaneously.
And then, Shailesh, also if you look at the energy mix of the industry, okay, now let's stick to the passenger vehicle industry. I mean, at Tata Motors, there's a stated target of 2045 to be carbon neutral across the value chain. And in your portfolio, if you look at, you're also kind of stepping up the gas in terms of on alternate fuels, CNG. So tell me, in the overall mix, how do you see the energy mix panning out in terms of in your portfolio? Diesel already on its downward trend. How do you see petrol growing, and how do you the others, including upcoming maybe high ethanol blend and then flex fuel?
Right. See, if it was possible for us, we would have loved to transition to electric as soon as possible. But there are real constraints there, given that the supply side will not be able to ramp up so fast. You have consumer mindset, which will take its time. There is an inertia in the mindset to shift to a new technology, which will take its own time. The charging ecosystem and all will also grow. So we have to acknowledge first that you can't accelerate to the extent that you would have liked to move towards zero emission technologies. So there's a challenge in the next 10 years. Therefore, how you still keep the overall emission low, and therefore the different alternate fuel types, as you mentioned, is going to play out. Now, how it is going to play out, and absolutely, I'm sharing our point of view, and anybody can contest that because everybody will have different kind of point of view. You are right that diesel will ebb to very low levels by the end of this decade, is what I believe. Every emission norm, there will be a difficulty for diesel to remain viable from a consumer perspective. Petrol as a engine would remain, but it will more move towards CNG, for example. I would imagine that between CNG and electric, you'll have 25 to 30% mix of both as individual fuel types. So say 25-30% electric, 25-30% CNG is the mix I see by the end of this decade. And
for the industry or for Tata Motors?
For the industry, I'm saying. For us, I would believe that we would do more deep as far as our electric penetration is concerned, and we would like to be around similar number as far as CNG is concerned as would be the industry. And rest would be flex fuel, if I just take the petrol as a category, which will be the primary, and then you'll have interventions like XCVs, hybrid, strong hybrids, PHEVs, and including, the flex fuel, which is being pursued by the government for also other reasons of reducing the import dependence. I think this is the kind of mix eventually what I see.
Would you also like to have some options of hybrids in your portfolio? Maybe, no?
See, for us, we have to meet a certain profile as has been defined in the CAFE, right? And if I'm able to do that with electric, and if the future is going to be electric eventually, because you have seen how in Europe and UK it has been defined that by 2035, every vehicle has to be electric. There's no scope for hybrid. So if I'm not invested already into hybrid, why I would direct my resources to that technology also? I'll put my 100% resource towards what is the future. So, and I'll be able to meet. Possibly if you ask today in the industry, which is the company which is best positioned as far as CAFE is concerned, it would be Tata Motors with an 8%, 8.5% electric penetration already. For us, it might require just 3-4% to meet that, but we are already meeting it. So there's no need for us to get into hybrid. And with CNG electric mix, I think we are able to manage this well. For players who are already invested into hybrid, it makes sense as far as they are concerned for the purpose of meeting the CAFE requirement. It makes sense for them to continue. And therefore, for us, it does not make sense till you get cornered that by the end of the decade, you see that this technology becomes an imperative for some reason.
Right.
We'll think then, but in the next 5 years, I don't see a role of hybrid in our portfolio.
Right. And also talking about electric again, recently the government also kind of notified battery quality standards and given a timeline for the industry to meet. What's your view? I mean, some say that perhaps while the intention is good, the timeline is a little too stringent. It's impractical. Right?
So we are studying. I think, if I remember correctly, there are about 15 additional interventions which has been added to the already AI S038. This was supposed to be, I think the timeline was December 22, which has been brought forward with additional 15 interventions. The team internally had been studying that, and we are trying to assess what timelines it would require. But anything related to safety, we should be pursuing is what I would say. It's a matter of discussion with the government then on the logical and practical timelines associated with that. So one, I would say, welcome step that we are trying to enhance the safety of the electric vehicles, which is very much required for, giving confidence and evoking confidence among the customers. But we have to do that in logical timelines. Maybe we'll have to bucketize the interventions in logical timeframes and all. So this is something which we are studying, and we'll engage with the government on this.
And in terms of your, you signed the agreement with Ford to take over the Sanand plant, which I would believe will play a key role in your scaling up your EV. So now, what is the timeline you're looking at in terms of rolling out from there, and the capacity about 300,000 odd?
Yes, so
that would be good for.
We have just now signed the definitive agreement, and there are certain steps that are needed from now to also the time that it will take us to retool the factory to suit the requirement of the models that we want to make there. Eventually, this factory would start gravitating towards making only EVs, but to start with, it will be a mix of EVs and ICE to support the utilization of that plant. The capacity, as you rightly said, is 300,000, but it can be further enhanced to about 400,000. So that's the thing. But we are in the process of deciding which product comes where in the 3-4 facilities that we have. Now we'll have 2 facilities in Sanand and 1 in Pune, and there's a joint venture factory that we have in Ranjangaon. So we're just trying to see different permutation combination of which goes where, and also parallelly working on retooling this factory.
And what's kind of overall investment do you have kind of earmarked now for scaling up the EV part of the business and on the EV side? I mean, of course, the growth graph will be different. growth curve with
So
the
as
different?
far as the EV is concerned, we had publicly stated that we have an intention of investing nearly $2 billion, which is roughly 15,000 crore in the next 5 years only in the EV space. And that is what will be needed to build capacities, invest in the new technologies, architectures, as well as the 10 products that we want to. That's the plan there. And as far as PV ICE side is concerned, it is a self-sustainable business. Typically, you spend 5 to 7% of your revenue into investment into new products and life cycle management, meeting regulations and all. That is the ballpark kind of a number we'll be at.
And in terms of global ambitions for, because the electrification megatrend also gives India a chance to play at a higher level in terms of scale in the global EV market. So Avinya, I understand that is one key platform. But in terms of right now, have you kind of started kind of tapping any overseas markets?
So as you rightly said, that's the logical time frame when we should be targeting some of the key markets, I would say, because one of the key handicaps that we had as Indian manufacturers was that we were always 2 generations behind from an emission norm perspective. And therefore, it was difficult to really, even if we had a very competitive product, we could not market it in those markets. Electric vehicles has taken away that constraint, and therefore it is important that as we are fiercely competing here with all the global players, we can definitely go out and sell our vehicles. So we are actively considering some of the markets. It is under study, and at the right time, we'll talk about which markets we are targeting.
Lastly, Shailesh, we are having this conversation around World EV Day. What is Tata Motors? I'm sure you have done a lot of study for the growth prospects of the industry in India, overseas. If you look at the timeline, two milestones of 2025 or 2030, what's the kind of scale you expect the Indian and the global industry to achieve?
That's an interesting question. Too much of speculation and crystal gazing. But, as I said, from a penetration perspective, I can talk about. Yes. India by 2025 is as one timeline you are saying. Right now, we are at 1.5% at an industry level penetration. This will by 2025, I expect, with all the new launch activities that we are seeing and the traction and high consideration that we are seeing for electric vehicles among the customers, this has the opportunity of reaching about 10% or so. We are already, in the electrified models at 20%. It is very much possible if all the players come with their own models. It will just electrify the demand for electric vehicles. Yes. And by 2030, we should just believe that government has taken a vision of 30% and government is supporting through policy interventions the entire ecosystem players working towards 30%. We are committed. I already said that we would be targeting like 50% by that timeline is what my expectation would be. And our effort also will be aligned to that. So hopefully 30% by then. For globally, though, I think it will be much higher, I would expect, because all the key markets have already declared of their movement towards electrification. Yes. So by 2030, UK would be 100% electric, and majority of the demand would shift to electric in Europe also. China and US also will be at reasonable level. These are the key markets. So the penetration here should be much, much higher.
And India could be in the top 5 by then for EVs.
Hopefully, I would believe that India would be. Although India has not taken as specific targets as what Europe and UK have taken. But if you just see the players who are operating in these markets, can't imagine that if Europe and UK have electrified 100% by 2035, as Indian auto players, we cannot be too much disconnected with where the world is. Right. So therefore, we'll also go for aggressive timelines.
On that note, Shailesh, thank you very much for yet another.
Thank you, and a happy World EV Day to you.
Best wishes to you too and your team and to all the industry players. And thanks, viewers, for watching this very interesting and insightful conversation with Mr. Shailesh Chandra, Managing Director of Tata Motors Passenger Vehicles and Tata Passenger Electric Mobility. Till we meet again, take care. Goodbye.